If you started playing Dungeons & Dragons in the last year or so, then there is a very good chance that it was probably because of one of the many extremely popular D&D live streams like Critical Role, Dimension 20, High Rollers, and so many others, and there is an even higher chance that these streams have probably tainted your perception of the game or the way that it's played in a very particular way. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, not that it's done anything bad to your perception of the game, but it just probably has. These streams focus extremely heavily on roleplay, story, character development in ways that were probably not all that common prior to them. I am absolutely not going to say that nobody played like this before. I'm sure that many groups did and they had phenomenal experiences doing that, but I think it's kind of part of what made these streams so engaging and captivating is almost the subversion of expectations of what Dungeons & Dragons really is. These are not groups of basement-dwelling teenagers playing make-believe. These are groups of fully grown adults playing make-believe. But in all seriousness, I really believe that these are some of the key takeaways from these games, that they can be played by anyone, and there is so much more to it than just some imaginary sword fighting. For so many people, myself included, these characters became real. The environments, they became tangible. We became invested in the relationships between the various different characters, and we cared about the hardships and the successes of this world that was sort of developing and growing around us. But alas, I digress. There have been absolutely no shortage of videos talking at length all about the Matt Mercer effect and whether or not this has been good or bad for the game, and I actually even made my own video about it, but there have been far fewer attempts to help guide newer DMs or maybe even more experienced DMs and players towards how to make this style of game a reality if you wanted it to be. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today, so be sure to subscribe for more, check out some analytics, and let's just get on with it. Just to get ahead of it, no, I am absolutely not saying that this is the quote-unquote right way to play the game and that anyone should play like this if they don't want to. But as I have discussed in the past on this channel, I am positive that there is a relatively large subset of people who were introduced to the game by Critical Role and the like who probably do want to play a game like this, and that is who this video is for. And this segues very nicely into point number one, which is to say that this is not a game style that is suitable for everyone. The first step to making this type of game a reality is very obvious, and it's making sure that your entire group is on board. Even one player that is not quite as committed or doesn't really want to play the game like this will essentially make it a non-starter. The reason for this is honestly that playing a campaign in this way does genuinely require a very different level of commitment, investment, and possibly even a different skill set than a normal campaign would generally offer. Players will more often than not be speaking to each other in character, and this does actually require a lot more effort than it might seem on the face of it. This is going to require quite a bit of extra patience from you and your entire group to make sure that each person can have their own scenes kind of play out and allow time and space for their characters to develop it in a natural and an organic way. And it's also going to require commitment from your players to actually get invested and to want to make these things happen. Both of these, though, are actually pretty tall asks. If you've managed to get through the first hurdle of ensuring that your entire group and everyone is on board to play a game like this, then the patience piece is likely to come fairly easily. But actually getting the level of commitment between your players to actually get that kind of investment and involvement is orders of magnitude harder. Something that you should really keep in mind is that generally speaking, the players on these live streams are professionally trained, and odds are your table is not. It's definitely going to feel really awkward, a little bit clunky, and kind of funny to just jump into a game and suddenly sort of be your character, but it's kind of the only way that you can really make this happen. But as long as everyone is doing it together, it certainly makes that experience a lot easier and feel really less awkward. The third point that I want to talk about is that the quality of games like this is so much more than just in the hands of the Dungeon Master. Everyone points to Matt Mercer and we'll talk about the fantastic job that he does as a DM, and that is true. Matt is a fantastic Dungeon Master for this type of game. I mean, I'm sure he's great at other styles too, but that's not really the point that I'm trying to make here. It can be very easy to look at Critical Role and just sort of think, well, I'm not as good as Matt, so my game will never be that good. And to that, I would really say that the DM is kind of only one relatively small piece of the equation. The players actually have, or well, they at least should, have much more of an impact on the overall story and its development and progression throughout the game than the Dungeon Master does. I actually even talked about this in my last Critical Role video, but if you think about some of the most memorable aspects from any of these games and these streams, there is a really high chance that the DM actually wasn't involved in it. Now, obviously all that is not to say that the role of the DM is not important. That would be ludicrous. I generally like to think of the DM as more of like a crossing guard, if you will. Someone that's there to guide the players and provide them a little bit of a framework to work in. Their job is to find these interesting pieces of lore and backstory that you have created for your characters and weave those things together to create a rich and fulfilling story, even if it gets sidetracked by some of the decisions that the group makes along the way. Point number 4 is the power of silence. Do not underestimate the power of silence. Let your players speak to each other, and more importantly, let them fill in their own knowledge gaps sometimes, particularly if it's about pieces of their own backstory. Saying nothing and letting your players effectively run the show is such a profound way that you can really flip the script on a campaign. Tip number 5 is just do not decide things beforehand. You need to be very comfortable with the knowledge that your players might do something that is completely unexpected, and you really need to be able to sort of just go with the flow. Being the type of DM that spends hours and hours memorizing a dungeon layout is probably not going to go particularly well for you in this type of game outside of a few circumstances. You'll need to get very good at having these broad strokes concepts of towns and NPCs and plot hooks and conversations and all these types of things that might come up during the game. It might be very difficult. It might be extremely hard, especially at the start, but with practice and a cooperative group, it does become significantly easier. The next few points are all about character creation. Now, contrary to popular belief, I genuinely do not believe that you should be showing up to your games or to your campaign sessions with fully detailed, fully panned out descriptions of your characters predetermined levels 1 through 20. In fact, I feel that that might actually detract from your character's natural and organic growth and development. A while back I made a video talking all about creating well-rounded characters, and I will leave a link in the description for that, but I really believe that it's at this point in the character creation process that some of those concepts are absolutely crucial. Beyond just knowing where your character has been, what they're working towards, or the type of person that they want to become, in order to have a well-rounded character, you need to have a very keen sense of their flaws. What is something that might send your character down a wrong path? What are some of their vices? And maybe even let your DM know some of these things and consider trying to play into them. Now, I am not saying that you need to send your character down every dark path at every single opportunity, but should the correct set of circumstances arise and there doesn't seem like there's a better option or another way out for them, these can lead to some incredibly interesting and fascinating story arcs. The next point number 7, I think maybe is all about backstory. When you're thinking about backstory, intentionally leave holes for your DM to fill, and these can be as minimal or impactful as you are willing. Relinquishing a little bit of control can be very scary at first, but can absolutely lead to some of the most incredible moments when you don't know exactly how something is going to play out. As an example, in the campaign that I am running right now, one of my players is a bard and he wanted to multi-class into warlock. He essentially let me not only pick his patron, but also the moment that it was all going to happen. I ensured it made contextual sense within the development of the story and the backstory that he had provided to me, and it has been a really interesting plot point so far. The final point that I want to discuss today is about ability scores. In this type of a game, when it comes to character creation, you should probably try focusing a little bit less on min-maxing and power gaming. If you're trying to play a game like Critical Role, odds are you're probably more in it for the story, the camaraderie, and the development anyway. Pick the class, background, and race that best suits the vision for the character that you want, and not necessarily just what gives you the best stats. Also, if you end up with some bad ability scores, really try embracing those and maybe playing into them a little bit. Definitely not obnoxiously, you don't want to be kind of stealing the show constantly and overplaying everything, but really be acutely aware of how that -3 charisma ranger might be interacting with other people. I've said it countless times in this channel before, and I'm sure that I will say it many, many more, but Dungeons & Dragons is a collaborative experience, and this might be the sort of ultimate culmination of that. Playing in or running a really RP heavy campaign can be incredibly daunting and scary and uncomfortable, but if that is what your ultimate goal for your Dungeons and Dragons campaign and sessions are, then try and embrace it. Find the right group and make it happen. Again, there is no right or wrong way to play D&D. This is just one of the more popular methods right now. Play the type of game that best suits you and your table and your group, and just have fun, because that's actually what this game is all about. But otherwise, until the next one, take care.